Welcome to Interviews with Innocence, a podcast about spirituality, consciousness, and exploring the wisdom our children bring into this world. I believe that our very young children are our greatest teachers. After all, they're the masters of living in the present moment, bubbling in unconditional love, enjoying the messiness of life, and curious about the universe in all its dimensions. The pure essence that young children exhibit lives within all of us. My hope is that these interviews will help us discover, embrace, and connect with the sacred core of childhood that resides within each of our hearts. I am your host, Marla Hughes. Today, Tony Cicoria, Dr. Tony Cicoria, is back on the show. Last week, we heard his amazing IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, talk on the greatest hoax, the true nature of man. After our conversation, we started talking about some other issues about being a savant, and I wanted to include that this week to just kind of tie everything together. Dr. Cicoria is a part-time practicing board-certified orthopedic surgeon in Maine. He had an unfortunate or fortunate luck of being struck by lightning in 1994 when speaking on a public telephone during a family reunion. As a result of the lightning, Dr. Cicoria had a near-death and out-of-body experience and became a sudden savant for classical piano music and composition. Welcome back to the show, Tony. So one thing I would like to talk about that you mentioned in your talk is about where consciousness comes from, and that light building I have down here is part of matter. Light is intelligent, full of energy. And you discuss the RA material, the law of one. I think I'm putting that all together correctly. Can you just chat about that for a minute?
Sure. In my discussion of, where does consciousness come from? One of the things that I had come across is an experiment called the raw RA material. This was an experiment in 1981. It was done by Don Elkins, Jim McCarty, and Carla Ruckert. And what they were trying to do was they were going to use Carla as a channel, and they were trying to make contact with an alien civilization. This is the time, I think, in our history when people were trying to understand, about aliens and, where we come from and all that sort of stuff. And so they were going to try this idea of channeling an alien civilization as opposed to putting up a giant collector on the top of a mountain and trying to listen for sounds. And so they started this experiment, and instead of contacting an alien civilization, they made contact with what's called a sixth density collective or social memory complex from the Confederation of Planets in the service of the one infinite creator. And that's who they said they were. And so, it's like, okay, well, who are these people? So we're third density. There are two levels above us, and they exist as a social memory complex. So that all of these souls who were part of that civilization are somehow all connected into one.
Wow.
And they are aware of everything. And they exist in what's called service of the infinite creator. So there is one infinite creator, and their service, they exist to help people. So they are in service to others. And one of the things that came out of this is that you can be in a positive density, or you could be in a negative density. A negative density would be service to self. So you're only interested in helping yourself as opposed to helping other people. You can never climb above a certain level in service to self. Eventually, everybody's got to become service to others oriented if they want to progress to the next level of advancement. And so one of the things that I found interesting in reading this series of books, it was a 5-book series, and they talk about the beginning. And so the question is, where does consciousness come from? And one of the things that I found interesting was that they describe an evolution of the beginning that's similar to what's in Genesis. And I was really struck by that. And they said that in the beginning, everything was infinity. I was like, okay, and I was like, what did that mean?
Right.
And you know, and that's something I still have a hard time wrapping my head around. But then they said infinity became aware. That awareness led to a focus of infinity into infinite energy or love. And this is where love comes from. It's actually what infinite energy is. And that is the creator. The energy moved from intelligent infinity due to an outpouring of creative forces and created patterns in a holographic style as the entire creation. And the patterns of energy somehow regularize their own local rhythms and fields of energy, and it creates dimensions and universes and physical matter. And this is way above my understanding, but it makes sense to me and is similar to what the Bible says in Genesis about, in the beginning, there was nothing. It was infinity. And then out of that the infinity became aware, and then there was energy, and out of that came light. And light was just a vibrational distortion of infinity, and it became the building block of matter. And that light was intelligent and full of energy. And the first things of intelligent infinity were then called a creative principle. And the spiraling of energy produced galaxies and planets and all that other great stuff. So the point being that all things, all life, all creations were part of an original thought. It all came from one source, and all exist in the quantum field. And one of the things that's interesting in my reading about quantum field is that we only see 4% of it.
Yes.
The other 96% is made up of dark energy and dark matter. 72% is dark energy, and 24% is dark matter. And I still don't know what that is. And I don't think anybody else does either.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that, you know, it's that part of the quantum field we don't understand. And I've read a number of articles that suggest that everything exists in that part of the quantum field we don't know about. That's where all memory, all history, all everything is recorded in this three-dimensional matrix of some place that exists, but
like the Akashic Records.
Yeah, the Akashic Records is a perfect example. Right. I mean, it's all stored out there. It's accessible, but if you don't know how to access it, good luck.
Right. Well, thank you.
But some people do, and that's, The fact that if one person can do it, everybody can do it.
Exactly.
And that was one of the things that I came to an understanding of with my music. And, in discussions with Oliver Sacks, and it's like, we were on opposite ends of the fence on this. He was like, well, it's got to be something that's circuits related. And it's like, I don't think so. I said, it doesn't make sense to me. And one of the things that happened with my near death experience was that I had suddenly become music oriented. I was hearing music, I was playing music, and I had no understanding of where it came from. But then I was contacted by Daryl Treeford, who's a physician who specializes in savants. And Daryl said, I've got this whole group of people that are similar to you. And I'd like to, include you in this group. And I thought, okay. And so I met a lot of these people. And what was interesting to me was that they all had some event. Either they got hit in the head, they had surgery, they had tumors, they all had something that caused the change. But then they all developed something they didn't have before. And it's like, okay, so this is very similar to my situation where I didn't have this ability before. I get whacked in the head by a lightning bolt, and suddenly I can do something I wasn't able to do before. And so, and the parallel to these other people was very strong. And, one of the things that Oliver had talked about was he thought that the lightning had somehow opened up circuits that I didn't have access to. So the question is did it open up circuits, or did it release some genes that had this information encoded there, and suddenly I had access to them? And that makes a lot of sense to me because of these other people that have had similar episodes and have developed similar talents. And it also makes sense to me because my son, when he was 12 or 13, came up out of the basement one day and said, here, listen to this. I'm like, what is it? I made a CD. I'm like, wait a minute, how did you do that? And so he just told me, he'd recorded it. He played all the instruments and recorded all this stuff. And I was like, holy mackerel. And the light went on. So, I'm carrying in me genes for this.
Right.
And even though I didn't know it and I didn't have access to it, those genes were able to express themselves with him. And so I think in my own way that the lightning did open up new pathways, new information through genes. And so that information exists. And, it's like, how does it exist? Where does it exist?
Right.
It is just at this point a point of conjecture.
Right.
But it's at least my feeling that we are able to communicate with the ether, the quantum field, if you will, of information. Our brain, there are a lot of people that have come to the scientific conclusion that our brain would have to be the size of a building to hold all of this information that we have. And so they've concluded that our brain is a receiver.
And a filter.
And a filter. Oh, a big filter.
Yes.
A big filter. And when you think of what the unconscious brain sees and hears and only allows 10% of it to go to consciousness, it's like, okay, that filter's out of control.
Right. And you talk about animals, about the dog. I love the dog story. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, anybody who has an animal has had this experience where, an animal can tell, it could be in the house and somebody within a 100-yard radius comes into this sphere of recognition. And if that person is bad, that dog knows it instantly. And, where's that ability gone? I think we have it, but we have downplayed it for so long and not recognized it that, we just kind of don't use it.
And isn't it interesting also, young children, I mean, they will sense, they don't want to go to someone or this or that. And I believe that they also sense that too, because those pathways are still open for them until.
Yeah, I think children are great resource for this kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, and unfortunately, what do we do the first time a child says, I saw somebody in my room? We go, "I'll stop, that's nonsense." Well, guess what? It's not nonsense.
Right.
I've got a friend that her daughter, when she was 3 years old, and she's she's in her room, she's talking to somebody, and the mother walks in and goes, "Who are you talking to?" And she said, "Grandma." And the mother says, "That's not possible. Grandma's been dead for 5 years." And she looked at her and she said, "No, she's right over there."
Wow.
And it's like, okay. So how often does that happen? And we poo-poo it. We say, "That's not possible." Well, guess what, folks?
It is.
And we cause that to be extinguished in children, or their friends cause it to be extinguished, because if they told one of their friends, then they would be ridiculed. And there's nothing more powerful than ridicule in controlling a child.
What do you think? How do you think humanity would change if we raised children being so open to that and just curious and encouraging stories?
I think that we're headed for a paradigm shift.
Yes.
Anyway, because all of these things are starting to occur in multiple locations and multiple situations, and people are going to start to realize that we're not alone. There are lots of other things we don't understand, and I think that part of that will be, the relaxation of what you expect of your children. But I think that it's probably got to come from us first.
Right.
And that's not going to be an easy thing to have occurred, but I do think that, in my readings, I've read lots of people have said that there is something coming that's going to force all of these things to occur. What is that something? That I don't know.
Do you think it will be within our lifetime?
Yep. I think it's going to be probably near the end of it.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's, within the next 20 to 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's, one of the things that I've read from numerous sources now, that there's going to be an event that initiates a massive change in consciousness.
Wow.
And I hope I'm around to see it.
Yeah, me too. Is that in the books, the Man Being series?
Yeah, it's also in that.
Right.
And and they've not come out and said what's going to happen, but there'll be a massive shift in consciousness at some point.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we need that. We need that transformation. This world does.
Yeah,
This
desperately. When you look around you and you see the things that are happening, not just here, but in other countries and the horrible things that are happening, and you go, if I was God, I would flush the damn thing and start over again. And I'm sure that it's happened before.
Yeah.
But
Tony, if you would have 35 years ago, if you would be listening to this interview of you, would you be like shocked?
35 years ago, it was unacceptable for people to talk about this stuff. I mean, as a physician in the 90s, if I had come out and started talking about this stuff, somebody would have called the state and said, this wacko needs to have his license revoked. And that was the mentality in the 90s. And to a large extent, it was my little secret, and I left it like that for 10 years.
Well, wait, how many years ago was your NDE?
That was in 1994.
Okay, I meant even before that.
Oh.
If you would be listening to this interview.
I think I was a crackpot. At the time, 30 years before that, I wouldn't have been high enough evolved to have understood.
Yes.
Really not. And I think that it's just beginning to happen.
Do you feel like it's been I don't know if I want to use the word gift or a blessing that you've had this experience? Because it's wonderful, but there's some hardships having these experiences also.
Absolutely. It has been a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
And the blessing has been that I have gotten to have tremendous experiences from it and discovery about myself and the world. But the downside has been, back when I was absolutely consumed with music, and anything that took time. I mean, I went to work every day, but when I got home, it was music. I spent time with my kids when I got home, and I would always sing them a song, put them to bed. I never got home early enough to have dinner with everybody. But my wife wound up being neglected. And we wound up getting divorced over it. And then as she said, you only are in love with your piano. And I think at the time, that was true. As time went on, and I realized that I needed to have balance in my life, I was able to do that. And we wound up getting married again 10 years later.
Oh.
But, and during that period of time, it was the thing that was always most important to either one of us was our kids and our family.
Yes.
And, even when we were divorced, we still did all the holidays together, and people would make fun of us and say, you guys are not divorced. But, it gave each of us a chance to realize that, the things that were important, were really important and were worth saving. So I think that was what kind of brought it all back together again.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. Well, thank you once again. I think I've taken
Absolutely.
up. Yeah, really. It's been an honor to spend this time with you.
Same here.
Hopefully we'll meet in person one of these days.
That'd be great.
I would love that. Well, thank you so much. Once again, have a great day.
Thanks, Marla. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening in today. If you want to learn more about the show, you can find us at interviewswithinnocence.com and on Facebook or Instagram at Interviews with Innocence. Please write me a message, tell me what you liked, and let me know what else you would like to hear. I would love to hear from you. And if you liked what you heard, please leave us an iTunes rating and review. It helps other listeners find the show. Thank you.